Lewin's force field theory of change, before we can implement it and apply it to real businesses, we're going to need to understand the principles. What does this theory say? Well, the first thing it says is that it's a theory to help businesses manage and deal with change. And the first thing that they're going to have to do is recognize that they face what's called a problem situation. And what that is when a business, there's a difference between how things currently are, which we call the present state, and the way the business would like them to be, which we call a desired future state. So when there's a difference between the way things are and the way things we'd like them to be, the business needs to come up with some strategies to respond. Now, the second part of the theory says that there's going to be driving forces that are going to encourage this change. So they're the forces which support and encourage the business to implement the change and actively make it possible. However, like there's going to be forces supporting the change, there's also going to be forces against the change, and we're going to call those restraining forces. They're the forces that cause resistance to change, to prevent it from occurring and actively try to stop the change. And then Lewin's theory very simply says change will occur when there's more driving forces than there are restraining forces, and or the driving forces are of a greater weighting than the restraining forces, so they're more important. So there might not be as many driving forces as there are restraining, but maybe they're of greater weighting or significance, so therefore change will happen. Likewise, on the opposite side, we say change will not occur when there are more restraining forces than there are driving forces, and or, again, maybe there's not as many restraining forces, but they're just of a greater weighting or importance than the driving forces. And what we're left with is a theory that we can sort of explain and summarize in a nice diagram. So we start off and say there's a problem situation, and that is when there's a difference between how things are, the present state, and how we'd like them to be. And the theory says, well, you've got to come up with some changes to fix that. You've got to get from the present state to the desired future state. Now, there's going to be some driving forces to encourage that, and we're going to go through 10 of those later in the chapter. But there's also going to be some restraining forces, and there's going to be 6 of those, and we'll look at those too later on. And basically the theory says, well, change will occur when there's more of these driving forces, or they're of a greater weight, and change won't happen when there's more restraining forces, or they're also of a greater weight. And basically management's job is to do 2 things. 1, you want to implement strategies to promote or encourage the driving forces, increase the number of driving forces, or maybe their intensity or weight. And on the other side, your job as a manager is to overcome or prevent these restraining forces, either decreasing them or eliminating them, or decreasing their importance. And together, that's how we would describe the theory. It's a big theory, but if you break it down into little steps and look at it as a diagram, it's going to be much easier to explain.